What's up, everybody? Welcome to the newest episode of Demo Day,
the podcast for entrepreneurs
and venture capitalists,
where we demystify
the culture of joining one of the top
accelerator,
incubator, or VC programs from around the world.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Demo Day. I am your host, but I am not Sean Goldfaden. I am Stephen Rutze, one of the producers behind Demo Day, and today we're turning the camera around on ourselves. I will be interviewing Sean, the founder and CEO of CoEfficient Labs and the regular host of this program. Sean is a Southern California native who launched his entrepreneurial career in third grade. He went on to win the University of Miami's business competition and now runs CoEfficient Labs, a top user acquisition team in Los Angeles and the proud squad behind Demo Day. Please enjoy this special two-part episode on our founder, Sean. This will be the season 1 finale. If you haven't yet, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts and leave a review. Season 2 is soon to follow. Without further ado, let's get into Demo Day. Hello, everybody. My name is Steve Rutze. I'm normally behind the scenes here on Demo Day, but today I am in front of the microphone and the camera interviewing our host, Sean Goldfaden. Sean and I have actually known each other for over 10 years now. We first met in Miami where we played soccer together. Sean was our goalie. You know, normally the goalie's the kind of unathletic one on the team who's not as fast or has as much stamina as the rest of the club. But Sean, you know, we do those half-mile laps. You were always the first one to finish. You would be lapping people when we had 3 or 4 laps to go. Always appreciated that about you. And, you know, I was captain of the team, you were captain of the team, but you were also the goalie, which is sort of a true like captain's position where you're sitting in the back, you see everything happening in front of you. So I wanted to start with a little question about soccer and business, and how is captaining a team or leading from the back similar to running your own business?
Steve, thank you for interviewing me. Thank you for the listeners watching Demo Day. This is going to be an exciting episode to talk about my story and how we got to where we are. When I think about soccer and being a captain of the team, you had mentioned something around leading from the back, and I think that's really the most similar correlation between the two, that when you're a goalkeeper, you're really standing the very back of the field and you have the full vision of the field in front of you. And there's really a couple of elements that are key to being a successful goalkeeper, right? The first one is really around having that singular mission. So it's really simple when you're playing on a soccer game. The mission or the goal is to win the game. And the way you win that game is by keeping everyone on the field totally aligned, right? So you have your defense, they have to all be in sync with each other. You have your midfield, all being in sync with each other. You have your forwards, all being in sync. So this concept of alignment and making sure that everyone is on the same page, rowing in the same direction, moving towards the same goal or the same mission, it's really similar in business. Now, in soccer, you have like each game is an individual, you know, opportunity to win, or each season you have like, you know, the tournament or the championship. And so it's very clear like what the objective or the mission is. But in business, there is no clearly defined, you know, milestone or clearly defined victory. And so what you have to do is almost create your own game. You have to create your own soccer field. And I think one of the biggest things I've learned in business is really to differentiate between this concept of family and the concept of team. And what's really amazing about soccer, for anyone that, you know, grew up playing on club or high school or college, when you are sitting on that bus, driving 6-8 hours with your team to go show up to a tournament, you're staying in the same hotel, you have this feeling of family, like the togetherness of it, the moving in the same mission. There's very much so a feeling of we are a family. But with that being said, something that I learned later is that family is unconditional, right? You don't get into an argument with your little brother, your big brother, and all of a sudden just be like, oh, I'm going to let you go. You're off the team, or you're out of my family, right? Family love, this is unconditional. But high performance teams are conditional, right? These are teams that are conditional on performance, teams that are conditional on how you vibe with the rest of your squad. And I think in the earliest days of CoEfficient Labs, because of the fact that, this is really only my first real venture. Of course, we'll talk a bit more about what we did in college and high school and elementary school, but this is really my first venture leading a real team, growing as a real team. And in the first couple of years, I really felt, and not only felt, I talked like we are a family. We're this one happy family. Even now we're being filmed in a company office that was an apartment complex converted to an office. So it almost feels like you've got these roommates and we're all this family. But there was this moment where I was talking to a mentor and I was talking to him about, what I love the most about CoEfficient Labs is like, we're just this family. And he looked at me and he said, Sean, families are unconditional. Teams are conditional, and you should think about CoEfficient Labs and you should think about business a little bit more like your club soccer team or your university soccer team. And what he meant by that was, Steve, when you and I were on the soccer team, we loved every member of that team like they were our family. But if Jared went out the night before a game and was boozing it up, drinking, came late to practice, didn't have the same energy, it wasn't that absurd for us to think, oh yeah, the coach is going to bench Jared. Like he's not going to be able to play in the game today. And I think that when I shifted my mindset away from we're this family, this unconditional loving family, to we are a well-oiled, high-performing team, it really shifted my mindset and enabled CoEfficient Labs to keep taking the next steps and keep having each member of the team wanting to better each other. And so soccer had a really big impact in my way of thinking as it lays today.
Yeah, well, if you remember, we actually, your junior year, had to ask somebody to leave the team. He was one of our better players, but he was mean to the other players. He wasn't a team player. He would score almost every game, but he was bringing the entire rest of the club down, and there was no choice. Like you said, it wasn't unconditional. We said if you prove yourself, you can maybe come back later, but right now we can't have that attitude around. Staying on the soccer metaphor briefly, playing with you, I was always a very attack-minded midfielder. And so over the course of 90 minutes, you might have had to 3-5 times yell at me to make sure I had my man marked, right? And as the goalie, like you said, you see everything. So similar to in a game where you can't be putting every player exactly where you want them all the time, how does that work in business where this company has grown over the past few years and you can't have as much, we'll say, control over the positioning of every team member every day? What has that transition been like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll talk about it a little bit more down the road of the podcast, but I think a lot of it has to do with this concept of strengths and weaknesses. When you're growing up and you're playing Little League soccer, Little League baseball, right? It's kind of like you try a ton of things. You're the pitcher, you're the catcher, you're first base, you're second base. But really, once you start to move into high school and college and you get a bit older, you start to specialize into these different areas. And I think that, some coaches or some mentors or some managers really try to take people and that maybe they have a weakness, right? Maybe they're not the most agile or they don't have enough speed, and they really try to double down on their weaknesses. How can I help these people level up on their weaknesses? Whereas other coaches and other mentors say, let's not focus on your weaknesses. Let's try to double down or triple down on your strengths. Let's try to put you into a position to succeed. And I think that is very similar to soccer, that, oftentimes there are attacking forwards that should be attacking forwards. That's where they thrive. That's where they do their best work. But because of the norms of building a team or soccer, maybe the coach, when I say they, I mean a coach or a manager, tries to say, hey, Steve, maybe you should be more of a midfield attacker. And they try to mold you and help you work on some of these weaknesses. For me personally, what's worked the best has always been to try to put my team members in a position to succeed. And sometimes that means quite literally moving them around the field, bringing someone that was a forward back to midfield, changing my left defender to my right defender. But in today's world of business, it means just communication. And I think that's the through line in being a goalkeeper. And in today, I think you'll definitely remember this from soccer. I was constantly yelling at the team in a way, not yelling like you're doing a bad job, but, mark your guy on the left, mark your guy on the right, see the guy, he's moving in, he's moving out, check the guy behind you, always being communicating. And I think that it's changed from, you've got to mark this person into, all of the unknowns of business. I just recently heard this like really interesting way of thinking about growth and sales. And it starts out like when you're in your very, your first couple of months, and this is certainly true at CoEfficient Labs, the goal is like, we need to get across the street. I can see across the street. I know how I want to get there. So we go and we get across the street. Then it becomes, I need to go across town. I can visually understand and see where the end of the town gets to, but I'm going to have to take a little bit of a risk because I can't exactly see it. Then once you get across the town, you say, I'm going to go across the country. And you know intellectually how you're going to get across the country, but it's a bit further. Then you think international. And so each of these steps starts out as everything is very clear, it's very simple. And as you grow and you add more team members, whether it's soccer, anyone that plays ping pong or tennis knows there's only a little bit you have to think about. It's me versus you, 1-on-1, maybe 2-on-2. Once you start moving into basketball and soccer and football, you need to play a bigger game dynamic or a bigger team dynamic. So I think that, it's really around putting your team in a position to succeed. At least personally, that's how I've been running my biz.
Right, and I think that now that our team is 8 or 10 people instead of 12 instead of 2 or 3, you can have people who can really focus on what they're best at instead of saying, okay, we have 4 people and everybody needs to do 20 things. So we're going to kind of go back to the beginning now, like we always do on this podcast. Sean, tell us where you grew up and what you did for fun as a kid.
Contrary to my looks and appearance, people have thought that I am Greek, Italian, Mexican, Persian, pretty much every possible, nationality you could be. But I grew up, born and raised in America, grandparents from America. I did have some, great or great grandparents that were from Belarus, Russia. Shout out Gary Vaynerchuk. I'm almost positive we're cousins, but that's for another podcast. So most of my family, grew up in the West Coast of the United States. My dad and his family grew up in the East Coast in Jersey, New York. And I grew up in a really small town, Manhattan Beach, California. For anyone that has been there, it's an incredibly beautiful, it's an amazing place to grow up. I went to junior lifeguards when I was in the summer. I'd play sports with my friends. I always loved the fact and still love the fact that I have the same 15 to 20 friends that I went to elementary school. We're all still going to our weddings and raising our children together. And we had a very small community. I always joke that it was maybe 15 or 20 years before I actually went to Hollywood or downtown LA. When you grow up in a small town like Manhattan Beach, there's almost no reason to leave this sort of place. We used to call it the bubble. When we would go into high school, we'd say, are you going to leave the bub today, right? And it was this idea that you have the beach, you have a nice school system, fairly middle to upper middle class families, not a lot of hardships being brought my way. And I certainly was not the kid growing up that had to overcome, being from a poor family or, having some of the hardships of being an African American or different nationalities or different ethnicities growing up. I had a lot of the privileges of growing up in a very middle to upper class neighborhood family, and a lot of my struggle or a lot of my hardships came more from a personal perspective, a family and health and even myself, like I was incredibly overweight as a young child. And so dealing with kids that were teasing me or that didn't think I was good enough to make a specific sports team. So a lot of my, chip on my shoulder came from my own self-fulfilling prophecies, if you will, not as much of my external hardships that were brought upon me.
When I was talking earlier about your running, at soccer. Now, when we first met and we were 19 or 20, you were in the midst of getting yourself in super, super good shape. But the people who didn't know that, looked at you. One of our really close friends and roommates said, "There's no way he runs fast. There's no way." But I know that, from I imagine the first time you played sports, you're one of the most competitive people I've ever met, and I know that sense of competition has driven you throughout.
Yeah, I think it really, really stemmed from, elementary school. Like I said, I was always the overweight kid. I was always the one that was, oh, you're too fat to do this. You're too fat to do that. You can't be the team captain. You're not fast enough. You're not agile enough. You're not good enough in all of these areas. And so early on, it always was about like, oh, I'm going to prove you wrong. I would say to my friends like, yeah, I might be fat, but like that keeps me cool. That keeps me warm in the winter and gives me shade in the summer. Like I would always take all of these negatives and find ways to turn them into a positive or into a way of saying, you know what, fuck you, man. I'm going to show you like I could be the best at any sport. I could be the best at any video game. I could be the best at anything. And it doesn't matter how I look, how I act. It's all in my own head and what I can do. And I think it carried through in a lot of what I do. Something about competition, something about winning, that feeling of winning, like, you know what? I did it. I put the effort in. And what happened when there was a moment, I was graduating from high school and I know we'll talk more about high school, but I was graduating from high school and I had never had a girlfriend before. I looked at all of my friends going to college, partying, having a good time. I said, you know what? Fuck this. I am going to lose this weight. I was something like 250, 260 pounds at the time and very overweight, very unhappy. And I just didn't want to do it anymore. And so what I would do is I would go to the gym and I would stay at the gym for maybe 5 to 6 hours at a time. I'm talking a long time. I would go into the gym. I would run on the treadmill for maybe like 4 miles. I would get off the treadmill and I would go into the swimming pool. I would go and do laps until I couldn't do laps anymore. I even bought underwater headphones so that I could keep the jam going. I would get out of the pool, I would shower, I would dry off, I'd go back on the treadmill. I would go again until I couldn't go anymore. I'd jump back in the pool. And so this idea of like, I am going to do this. I am going to get a girlfriend. I'm going to figure this out. And it started by saying like, I don't have all of the tools. I don't have the personal trainers, or I don't have X, Y, and Z, but what I have is time. I have my own effort, my own energy. And I think that when I'm staying up at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 5 a.m., right, getting things done, or it comes from this place of this is on me. I know that, maybe it's not the life for everyone, but I can put this energy in and put this time in. And as a result, I will take the blame on my shoulders and I will take the rewards on my shoulders.
Yeah, and I like the image of the swimming pool, right? Because you compare swimming alone in a pool to being a CEO, and that's a lot of what it is. People don't see the time that you're spending an hour just swimming back and forth, just trying to better yourself. So you talked about how you sort of growing up, elementary school, things were pretty good for you. Then I know as you started high school, you had some family health issues that came up pretty early on when you were a young kid. So can you just tell us a little bit about that and sort of how your life changed when you were starting high school?
Totally. I think before jumping into high school, it's important to frame the context around I love sports, right? So sports enabled me to win. If I had a team like in elementary school, if any of my friends are listening to this, you're going to love this. Every single day in elementary school, every day at recess, we would divvy up into 2 teams. It would be my friends, Rosen, Kaminsky, CJ, Eric, Tate, a couple other crew, and then it would be Jonathan Weiss's team. Every day we would play football. My team against Jonathan Weiss's, David Chisholm, Brendan Paschas. If you're listening, much love, guys.
Those are the enemies.
Those are the enemies. Okay. Every day it was the same thing. We would set up, we would play, there would be a winner, there would be a loser. Then once I got into high school, I knew I wanted to do business. Like business and making money was always my jam. I was the kid doing a lemonade stand on like the bike path at the beach, making a couple $100 with my mom and my cousin. when I was in third grade. Really, I think my first entrepreneurial experience was in the third grade. I'll never forget it. Pokemon was the thing. All of my friends would go, they would buy these Pokemon cards. We would always like trade them or sell them. And I realized that there were all of these kids that had like 2 of the 3 cards. They needed that third card to complete their pack. And that third card happened to be the shiny card. So what I would do is I would take all of the shiny cards and I would put them into a deck, into like a binder with, kind of like a baseball card where you drop them in the plastic folder. And I would sell shiny only packs to the students in third grade. So at a really young age, I was always thinking about, how can I take something, kind of rebrand it, repurpose it, and sell it to other students. So when I got into high school, I was, hanging out. I'm a freshman, just transitioning, and I saw a card, like a flyer on my car that said high school students can make $18 an hour selling knives. And I thought, holy shit, $18 an hour, that's more money than I've ever thought of in my life. I want to check this place out. And so early on, right when I became a freshman at school, I joined this company called Cutco. And Cutco, for any of you know, is this company where they basically, it's like a direct sales, multi-level. I'm sure there's some pyramid scheme going on here. But basically the idea is you would get a set of knives and you would go door to door to door to door to all of these different people's houses trying to sell them knives. And at that time, to me, it became like the new sport. It was something I could win at. If I would go and I would sit down with someone and I could convince them to buy a pair of my knives, that was like the same feeling of like winning in a sports game. And so I knew freshman year that I liked business, I liked selling things. And then bam, just like right in the middle of it, I just absolutely got smacked in the face. And that's just around family health. And for anyone that listens to Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V has been someone that, I first got introduced to when I was a sophomore in college almost 10 years ago. Someone I look up to a lot. And one of the things he talks about is, hey, Gary, how do you keep such a great perspective when things are going bad? How do you keep that perspective positive? And he always talks about how what he does is he sits there and honestly pretends or tries to get himself to a place where his family, his mom, his dad, his brother, his sister is so sick or something horrible happens to him that by thinking about the people he loves the most having something tragic happen, it's able to help him put into perspective how little this thing is that he's tackling. And it's such a nothing burger. And I felt and think about that often, that I sort of got hit with that early. I felt when I was a freshman in school, even with this sort of new Cutco business, everything around me was falling apart around my family. My mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. My dad had this incredible serendipitous body scan that was given to him by his company, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And they found in this scan that he had 95% of his arteries were totally blocked, that he had, the doctor said to him, you have hours to days to live. And they caught it and gave him a emergency 5-way heart bypass, all in the same year. This is 3 months after my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. Mom is sick, losing her hair. Dad is in the hospital. We don't know if he's even going to make it. Both of my grandparents, who are in their late 80s at the time, grandma passes away first, grandfather passes away second. Now, these are people that I spend every day with all the time. And even on top of that, my fucking dog died, right? So it was like all of these things around me. Freshman year, I'm just transitioning into school. And it was very, very early days that I really realized, holy shit, man, everything can change in an instant, so immediate. And it really framed a lot of the rest of my life and how important family is.
So do you, on a day-to-day basis, was all this stuff happening at home affecting how you were acting in school, behaving in school, keeping up with your work, any stuff like that?
Oh, I hated school. I hated school so much. I hated being in the classroom. Well, I think I loved like seeing my friends. I was always, especially in elementary school, getting red cards for, talking to my friends in class, being distracting. I always tell this funny story that when I was in high school, just to give the audience some perspective, I was nominated for 2 nominations in our senior class. There's like most likely to become an actor, actress, or like most likely to be successful. No, I didn't get any of those. My 2 nominations were, number 1, I got nominated as the class clown. And number 2, I got nominated as the teacher's pest. Not the teacher's pet, the teacher's pest. I won the teacher's pest. So of all of the students in my entire grade, I definitely acted out in class. I liked being the funny kid. I liked getting attention. But what I hated the most was I hated learning things that I didn't care about. I didn't like going to history. I didn't like going to English classes, even though I, loved writing. I didn't like learning things I didn't like. But when I was able to do things I loved, like, selling knives or playing sports or doing things like that, I was just absolutely laser focused, and I could spend hours and hours and hours just doing that one single thing.
You didn't get most likely to start a pyramid scheme or anything like that after the Cutco days?
Hey, it's still early. I'm only 32.
So I think you kind of answered this question in there in the Teacher's Pest Award, but what are some other things that your teachers may have said about you when you were in high school?
I think that, generally my teachers loved me. Like it wasn't a, Sean's a bad kid, or like we don't like him. It was just like, man, this kid has ADD. Like he's all over the place, always talking to friends, always, jumping around, doing, sports and leading the team. They would have said I definitely was a leader of the pack. I loved being around people. I think being team oriented has just always been a part of my persona. But ultimately, I think that they wouldn't be too surprised. Like I have memories of Ginny Sofin. Ginny, if you're listening to this, I love you so much. But we were in middle school and high school, and this mom looked around. All my friends were like, oh, Sean, just like he's not going to do anything. He's going to do this. He's going to do that. And Ginny would go and say, Sean is going to be the most successful of your friends. Like you guys are going to be working for Sean one day. And I don't know. I think that stuck with me a long time, that, just because people put you into this box, especially when you're young, especially when you have all your friends and they're all like, you're this or you're that, or your parents are telling you you're this and you're that. Things like what Ginny talked to me about really put it into my mind that like you can change who you are, you can start over. And I think that's really what college was about for me. It was this chance to completely start over. No one knew who I was. No one knew my background. They didn't know I was fat. They didn't know I was skinny. They didn't know I, was a distracting kid. They didn't know anything. And I think that that was a huge moment, was knowing that I could completely, change kind of my past in order to make a better future.
So now we're at college, and you were telling us a little bit about how you did not love school growing up. So what led you to, we'll say, college generally, and then more specifically to the University of Miami?
So I was one of those kids that never wanted to go to college. I hated high school so much. I hated going to class so much that the thought of continuing and going to school was crazy to me. I was clearly the greatest knife salesman of all time. I knew that if I just kept, plugging away at this idea of business or sales or marketing or something, that it would be more productive than me going to school. And so I went to Mom and I said, Mom, I don't want to go to college. And Mom literally like spit up her coffee, and, it was mandatory. There was no optionality to whether or not I would go to school. My mom believes so strongly in education, so strongly in school. She had the opportunity for her parents to help her pay for college. She'd been saving her entire life for her children to go to college. And so it just was not an option. And she said, listen, you don't have to go to any school you don't want to go to, but you have to get a college education. And at the time, my grades were nowhere near good enough to get into a USC or an LMU or, a UCLA or anything like that. And they were, however, good enough to get into a school called Marymount. And Marymount is a 2-year, almost like a transitionary school where you go, they're much smaller classrooms. And the promise that Marymount gives is that they will help you get good grades. They'll help you learn and achieve your way so that you can actually transfer out of Marymount and go to one of these schools, typically like LMU or USC. And that became my path. Is I was going to go to school, and once I got to college, I immediately loved it. I wish they would tell people more that, once you get into college, you get to choose your classes and you get to learn, lots of different things and be around these, amazing people. And, it was just such like a new chapter going to Marymount. And I really fell fond of both marketing and psychology. I had many opportunities to try different types of classes, but these were the two that really felt like the most close to my heart. And there was a time, certainly in the first 6-8 months of going to school, that I thought, I want to be a therapist. Like, I love psychology. I love helping people that have, similar to myself, gone through these struggles or gone through these personal, trials and tribulations. And maybe I could help, take someone that was depressed or take someone that had schizophrenia or was bipolar, and I could help them kind of, build a deeper perspective or something. And I remember being in class and talking to my professor at the time and telling him that, someday I want to be like a psychiatrist. I want to be the person helping these people when they're at their hardest times. And he asked me a question, and he said, how does it feel, or how do you feel about taking your work home with you? And it was a very interesting way he said it, because as an entrepreneur and as a founder, I love working at home. I'm someone that, when I'm passionate about something, I've become so laser focused. But, he really spent time not telling me to do it or not telling me not to do it, but just helping me understand what could potentially be the future of doing this. And he said that, when you're meeting these people and you're trying to help them, it's really hard to separate what you do at work and what you do at home. And for me, it definitely is. Like, I'm, when I throw myself into something, it's all in. And I really thought a lot about, like, do I want to be going home on a weekend and thinking about someone that might commit suicide, or think about someone that is so horribly depressed they don't know how to get themselves out? And I thought, while I love psychology and I love helping people, I think that I want to live a more positive, a more creative lifestyle. And I ended up deciding that I really want to go into business, marketing, advertising, really anything that could potentially let me make money and use my creativity. And it was at Marymount that I had the chance to go and visit my cousin, Mike, who I know is listening to this, over at the University of Miami. And man, for anyone that's ever gone and checked out UM's campus, it is contagious from the moment you step on that campus. I mean, Steve, you have one of the nicest, biggest swimming pools with a huge diving board. There's 2 bars on campus. Students were drinking beers, beautiful weather almost every day. It was so different from what I had done my entire life, and no one knew who I was. And going there and being with my cousin and seeing this opportunity, I thought, this is where I'm going. I don't need to apply anywhere else. I applied to one school out of Marymount, and that was the University of Miami. I somehow was able to get in, and the rest is history. Miami was so incredible for so many reasons. But I think the biggest one was just the opportunity to start fresh. And I think that for anyone that has been, dealing with a year, 2 years, 3 years of kind of being in that funk or being in this sort of the same thing over and over again, when you change your environment, right? Like I know Tony Robbins talks a lot about this. Like, when you're depressed, you need to change your environment. You need to go for a walk. You need to jump into an ice cold pool or the ocean. And Steve, I would imagine it was the same for you in Buffalo. Like, when you're conditioned to just be doing the same thing, moving into a different environment was like a catalyst for creating a new identity or new persona. And so I was, I just couldn't be more excited to start fresh where no one knew who I was, no one knew my past, no one knew what I was capable of, and that gave me the opportunity, to start my next chapter.
I want to just quickly comment on the therapist thing and say that I think I'm not the only person who probably, when they're at that moment where they don't know what in the world they want to do, or are faced with two completely different decisions, they look at their phone and think, I'll call Sean. That seems like the right thing to do now. Let's talk through it with Sean. So however much of that psychology training you did do worked. But so you got to Miami. You had your cousin Mike there, so you had a great cheerleader sort of built in. Can you talk a little bit though? Because when I first met you, I was sort of confused because you were coming from London. So what was going on there? How is it that you went from Marymount to London to Miami?
So this idea of a study abroad semester was something no one had ever told me about in high school. I was unaware that you could go to school and also travel. And when I found out when I got into Marymount that the only thing holding you back from traveling the world and going to all of these countries was you had to have at least a 3.6 GPA, that became the motivator for me to do better in school. I applied to get into the study abroad program. It happened to be in London. And, going to London, back to that topic of kind of starting over and transitioning, Marymount was only a couple miles away from my house, right? It was in Palos Verdes. Every weekend I would go and either see my parents, I would go and see my friends at USC, UCLA. So I still hadn't started this next chapter. Mm-hmm. But when I went to London and I went to Europe, I was able to start fresh. I knew absolutely no one. I remember I went to Europe with my mom. She took me there. We started by going to Prague together. We got absolutely just shit-faced together, drinking booze, hanging out. I was 19, 20 years old at the time, and just having the best time with my mom. And we traveled to this small little town called Czech Bujovic. I'm sure I'm ruining this right now, to visit a family friend. And while we were in Czech Bujovic, we walked into a market, and the alcohol in the market was like $2 or $3 for a bottle of vodka or a bottle of rum or whatever. And so I literally bought a suitcase, an entire suitcase, and filled the suitcase up with about 40 bottles of alcohol. I'm not exaggerating. 40, maybe an entire suitcase. So when I got to my school in London, my thought process was, I'm going to throw the parties. I've been, going from Manhattan Beach to Marymount. I was going to these USC frat parties, seeing how they were doing, and I'm thinking, okay, I get it. You got to be the guy throwing the party if you want to be the one making the friends. And so when I got there, I would invite all the students into our room. We'd be popping bottles. We'd be having a good time. But it, again, there's so many of listeners to this that you grow up with your friends from middle school, elementary school, high school. And it's part of that culture growing up where you got to dig at each other. It's constantly, you'll say, oh, I think Kobe Bryant is the best basketball player. And your friends will almost immediately say, no, it's Michael Jordan. Or you'll say, my favorite color is green. And they say, that's a stupid color. It's brown. But it was this constant growing up of trying to prove yourself, trying to one up your friends. But when you transition into this place where no one knows you, you have none of that kind of original banter or anything going on. It changed the dynamic, and it was lighter. It wasn't so much about proving everyone that I was right and they were wrong. It was just about building. It was about making a community and meeting new friends, and traveling. It's something that is so incredible because every corner that you turn is a brand new experience, and your brain is just taking in these experiences, and it's such a different place, especially when you grow up in Manhattan Beach. You're in a small town. You see the same people, the same things. Now to transition almost every single weekend for 5-6 months, traveling to a new country, Ireland, Germany, Spain, Greece, Scotland, so many amazing places. And I was doing it all on my own, no parents there, with my friends, doing my thing. It was in Greece. I remember this very, very specifically. We're in Greece, in Santorini, driving ATV scooters all around the island. Spencer Spinner, if you're listening to this, I love you guys. Driving these ATVs all around the island. I've got my earbuds in, not AirPods at the time. These are wired. And I've got my earbuds in, and I'm listening to the Red Hot Chili Peppers, this song called Wet Sand. So if any of you guys want to turn on Wet Sand from Red Hot Chili Peppers to get your mind in this world here. But there's a part of the song where I was just like, holy shit, I am riding an ATV on top of a mountain in Greece with my very best friends, listening to music, wind blowing through my hair. And I felt, I'm even getting chills right now thinking about it. It was full serotonin, no drugs, no alcohol, just living life, the feeling of straight living. And I knew it right then that traveling was it. Like, traveling was the destination. Traveling was where I needed to keep getting to. How the fuck would I be able to travel if I was working a desk job or working 9 to 5? Or I can't do that. I have to keep doing this. I need to make my own money. I need to travel and see the world. So when I got out of London, while I was there, I found out that I got accepted to Miami. And when I got back to Miami, everything was around travel. I have to start a business. I have to make money so that I can go and do this more. And even today, this year was in Bali, was in Europe. Every year try to take 1 or 2 trips because it allows me to reset. Regardless, even if it's just for a couple of days, you don't need to change your environment for months or years. Even a couple of days can totally reset you, can totally ground you. And, that's my London story leading up to the University of Miami.
So now we're at Miami. I know you joined a frat. You joined our soccer team. We're obviously taking classes, finding new places to live, all that. At what point while living in Miami did you say, okay, yeah, I'm going to school, but now I need to start a business. I want to have a business going on right now?
Well, I think it started even the summer leading up to Miami. So I was in London for 6 months in first semester. Then it got into, we had our summer break. And during summer break, I had an internship working at a company called 1-800-Dentist. And before 1-800-Dentist even, I was very early on Facebook and Twitter, and they had only come out a couple years prior. So it was still the very early days of building a community or a follower or a page. These things were only out for months, if not a year or two at the time. And so I really became interested in this concept of building communities or followers. But when I got to college, I really wanted to expand that. It was like freedom. There was no professors telling me what I could or couldn't do. And so I did what many young entrepreneurs do these days. I turned to the internet and I went on Google and I started looking up like who is in this space, who knows what they're talking about. And I stumbled upon people like Chris Brogan. I don't even know if Chris Brogan is still in the game, but this guy talked about, the importance of building a community without asking for anything in return, creating content, writing blogs, providing value to people before asking for anything in return. And it really, changed my dynamic of this concept of social media and growth. Then I had the opportunity, I don't know how I came across Gary Vaynerchuk. It must have been, either somehow online. I still to this day remember one of his, I think it was like one of his real estate speaking gigs that just really stuck with me at the time. And he came out with this book called Crush It. And Crush It was really about how, like, if you have a passion, if you are a passionate person, you can put every ounce of energy and every ounce of your will into this thing. And in today's world with the internet, you can actually turn your passions into business. And it was such a different message from that you hear, growing up. Like, there's so many times your friends tell you like, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. And I had already been kind of conditioned with my friends saying, oh, you're too fat for this, you're too fat for that. And so there was something about this book that really lit a fire under my ass. And I mean, you were living with me at the time. It was almost this obsessive quest to find what was next. And, it started really, if you think about the lines of Crush It, it all talked about, lean into your passion, do what you're passionate. And at the time, I was passionate about my fedora hats. I was passionate about my outfits at school, about, redefining who I was. And one of the ways that I was redefining who I was in my look, right? And so I just got to Miami. Miami has that Latin flavor to it. And I thought that fedora hats were the coolest thing in the world. Like, if you remember, Steve, on almost a nightly basis, we would go out to the bars and I'd be wearing this fedora hat and all my friends hated it.
I remember because I just hoped that we wouldn't get beat up.
Yes. And so the fedora was something that I thought, oh, this is cool. This makes me stand out. This makes me, different than all of the other kids. And I was losing weight. I was getting healthier. I was playing on the soccer team. So I was really building myself up. And at the exact same time as me getting there, thinking about what do I want to do? I'm reading these books on business, entrepreneurship. I read this one book called The Long Tail. And for any of you that have never picked up The Long Tail, it's a really interesting book because it talks about this concept how you have Barnes & Noble, you have Blockbuster, you have Walmart, you have these retail brick and mortar establishments, and there's one thing in common of all of these different retail stores. They have limited space. You don't have endless amounts of shoes to put in a store or books to put in a store. You only have limited space. And what fundamentally changed about the internet is it created unlimited space. You could have unlimited inventory, whereas Blockbuster could only have the top, let's call it 1,000 videos in the store. What about the other 10 million videos? Barnes & Noble could only have, 20,000 books, but what about the other 2 billion that exist out there? And so the internet created this opportunity for unlimited variations. You could have, you could have blue and green and red and yellow, and you can have any color, any size, anything. And the internet created the storefront. And so I started thinking, how can I take my passion around style and fedoras and clothing and turn it into an actual business? And boom, that's when it hits me. Nike ID had just come out for shoes. You could actually go online and build your own shoes. And I thought, what if I could go online and build my own fedora? And that moment of like, whoa, I'm going to give away this opportunity for people to make customized fedora hats. So next step is I've got to get some fedoras. Where am I going to get the fedoras? I don't know anyone that has fedoras. So I go to eBay. I purchase about, 15 or 20 fedoras. I don't remember if you remember them coming to the house, but UPS truck comes, they drop off, couple dozen or whatever fedora hats, and I start trying them all on one at a time. 0 of the fedoras fit my head, none of them. And I thought to myself, fuck, this is not gonna work. I'm gonna have to ship all of these back. There's all the shipping costs to get them here. The unit economics were not working out. And that was before I even thought about how I was gonna build the website or what I was gonna do. And so I thought, I can't do fedoras. What else could I do that maybe is kind of similar? And at the time, I had this pair of pink and yellow sunglasses that my girlfriend at the time had given me. They were those like cheap Wayfarer style, very inexpensive $10 glasses that, everyone finds at, either a mall or in Venice Beach or whatever. You all know what I'm talking about. But the difference was I wanted to let people build them themselves. I didn't want to give you a selection and say, hey, here's the 10 colors or the 30 colors. I wanted to provide an experience where anyone could build anything they wanted. If you wanted a purple frame with a white ear and a pink ear, great. If you wanted to have orange and green sunglasses for football games, great. If you were a student at University of Wisconsin and you wanted to go in the bookstore and buy a pair of red glasses, great. So what I wanted to do was create unlimited variety in sunglasses, but allow the customers to choose themselves. And that was where Playfair came. So At the time, University of Miami launches or had a business competition. It was their elevator pitch competition. First prize got $20,000. And I said, I am going to freaking crush this pitch. And I go in. I made it past the first round. I get into the finals. And I don't know if you remember this, Steve, but there was a night, the night before the pitch competition, all of my friends are going out to the bar. They're all partying. And, you come up to see, hey, Sean, are you going to come out with us? No way, man. I'm studying my pitch. I'm getting this thing down. I'm visualizing the victory. And tomorrow I'm going to go and I'm going to take the W. And that next day I went in and I pitched my ass off. I had it down and took the room over, and I won the business competition at UM. And my university actually seed funded me $20,000 to get started. One of my best friends happened to live in Beijing, China, and helped me source my first products. And maybe 3 months after that, maybe 10, 15,000 sunglasses showed up in Miami in boxes. Had a whole slew of problems getting them through customs and getting them delivered. But at the end of the day, they showed up. And so the one thing that, I think about Cutco days is I have no problem walking and going door to door. I learned the importance of, if you want to sell something, it's a numbers game. You got to talk to 100 people before you get 5 of them to purchase. So I basically just went door to door to the fraternities, the sororities. I walked around with a little clipboard and I said, hey, write down what kind of frame color, what kind of ear color, whatever you want, and I'm going to make them for you. And then that transitioned into hiring my frat brothers. We did on-campus events. We sold into bookstores. But Playfair was an opportunity for me to build this new identity, right? I'd gone from the fat kid in elementary school and the distracting kid in high school to now I'm in college and I was the sunglasses guy.
And I remember there was a feature on you in our student newspaper, and you're sitting there in a Miami basketball jersey wearing sunglasses with 100 pairs of sunglasses around you. And I always felt like you loved having the label of sunglasses guy, that from even that point when we were 20 or 21, that you so deeply identified with the business that you were building.
100%. I think that it has to do, like, I'm an all-in guy. When I'm all in, whether it's on my friendships, my relationships, my business, we've had guests on the podcast before talk about work-life harmony, not as much about the balance, but the harmony. I think I'm constantly seeking that harmony, and I love making my business my persona. And I can't emphasize enough the feeling that you have, walking on campus as a 21-year-old student on like a Saturday for game day, right? Like every Saturday, all the students, everyone I know would be going to football games. We'd be loading up into buses. And you'd look around and there would quite literally be thousands and thousands of students walking around the football stadium wearing my sunglasses, trading them, giving them to their friends. And, that feeling of like, wow, I created this I sold these with my own 2 bare hands here. It was infectious. It was something that I longed for. And it's something that even to this day, I think people look at me and go, oh yeah, Sean, CoEfficient Labs, like he's in it, man. There's blinders on, right? I am all in. And I think it just has to do with, I really do associate, put myself into whatever it is. It really becomes, it becomes me.
And so, CoEfficient Labs you've now had for 5-6 years?
5 years now.
How long did Playfair last, and what happened?
So Playfair, launched my junior year of college. I ran it junior year. I ran it senior year. I ran it super senior year because I was a transfer student in. And around the super senior, right after that last year, I kind of looked around and I was like, damn, all my friends are gone. I'm like 23 now. I don't really know if I want to sell shitty sunglasses to freshmen and sophomores that I don't even know anymore. It lost that appeal of going to I didn't even want to go to the football games anymore. I didn't know anyone. And so I think there was a moment where I thought, man, like I definitely am good salesman, but I don't think I've got this whole business thing down yet. Like I didn't really have any employees. I was storing all the money I was making week to week under my mattress. I would have $12,000, $14,000, stupid amounts of money just stuffed under a mattress. And I didn't really have any of the frameworks for building a real team. And so my mentality was, I'm going to box all these sunglasses up. I'm going to ship them back to California and I'm going to start fresh. I'm going to go to UCLA. I'm going to go to USC. I'm going to start to build my sunglasses business back home where I can kind of, get back to neutral again. Like I said before, all my friends, my peers, everyone was already gone at the time. So I sort of felt like I was alone out in Miami selling these sunglasses that I wasn't too excited about anymore, that I wanted to start fresh. And so I moved everything to California, moved in with one of my best friends into an apartment. And the mentality at the time, this is back in around 2012, the mentality at the time was, I'm going to start fresh. Like I'm starting this up again. Like there's nothing stopping me. And around that same time, Instagram had just come out, maybe a year before that it had come out. So Instagram is very new, very early. I love taking pictures. I loved being on that platform. And as I'm scrolling down on Instagram, I see that one of the guys that I followed, his name's Kawicki, Dave Temple, 100,000 plus followers, early influencer for Instagram. And he made a post that said, you can buy my photography on Instagram as canvas art. And I thought, whoa, like that is fucking awesome. You're telling me that I could take a picture and someone could actually buy that piece of photography. I want to check this out. And I found out that it was a company in Santa Monica, in Los Angeles, called InstaCanvas. So I do a little research to see what's going on. And InstaCanvas had actually recently been accepted to what was called an accelerator program called Mucker Labs. I had never even heard of an accelerator program before, but I thought, man, like sunglasses are fun, but wow, wouldn't it be cool to join a team that like knows what they're doing and they're working on Instagram and they like do this cool stuff. And so I look at my roommate, I'm sitting on the couch, I see this photo, I look at him, I go, Kevin, I am working at this company. And I leave, I go into my backyard, I took a camera out, put it on a tripod, and basically filmed myself telling the CEO of this company why he should hire me. I started this company selling sunglasses. I'm the best sales guy. I love Instagram, all these reasons. And I tweeted the CEO and I said, hey, I've just created this video. I hope you'll take a look at it. A week or two later, he sends me an email back. I got an interview, and the next thing you know, I was hired as I was team member number 6 at InstaCanvas.
And how long did you stay at InstaCanvas?
So I'll talk about that in a second, but before going into the length of the job itself, I think it's important to set the context of like what it was like to be at InstaCanvas or in Mucker. There's so many students like me that, they've got a couple of buddies and friends. They want to start a business. They start hustling. They start going for it, but they don't really know what it's like to be a part of like a real accelerator program. I definitely didn't. But when I went for the first time and you see, 10 different companies all working under the same roof together, CEOs, designers, technologists, marketing people, I was obsessed. I thought it was the coolest thing. You just are around this energy, and it coming from a selling sunglasses out of my apartment to now being in this space where everyone is pumping each other up. And my CEO, Matt Munson, to me at the time, just out of school, he was like a god. Matt did this thing that he called stand up, where every day the team would get into a circle and we would do what was called stand up, and we would talk about, what we're working on for that day and what we're excited about. And it would go around in a circle, and Matt would tell us that, today I'm meeting with First Round Capital, I'm meeting with Benchmark, I'm meeting all these amazing VCs. And I was like, holy shit, this is so cool. I really looked to Matt like he was like a Steve Jobs-esque character, the way he brought us in, the way he focused us on growth. And at the time, InstaCanvas was, if not the fastest growing startup, one of the fastest growing startups in the LA ecosystem. thousands, tens of thousands of new users coming daily and weekly. And at the time, I was just fresh with ideas and energy, and I'm getting paid something like $250 a week, pretty much barely able to survive. But my level of happiness and excitement and passion was like 1,000 times what I could have even anticipated, because I was back on that team, right? It was going from being all alone to being a part of this squad, and everywhere I turned, the guys were more talented than the one next to them, and I put everything into it. I said, like, this is it. This is my family now. This is my squad, and began chipping away at their social. I went to Matt, the CEO, and I said, hey, I built my entire sunglasses business selling sunglasses on campus. I know Facebook, I know Twitter, I know all these channels. I can help us grow. And so they sort of put it into my head that if I do a really, really good job for them, I maybe someday could be the director of growth. And I was like, director of growth? What the fuck is that? And this is like 2013, around that year. For any marketers listening to this, this is around when oh my gosh, what is his name? From Qualaroo, Sean Ellis, boom. This is the year, around that time, Sean Ellis coined the term growth hacker, okay? This is around 2013, it wasn't even a thing before this, but growth hacker. And so all of the new startups were hiring for growth. And I thought, whoa, like that sounds really cool. I want to do that. There's a little bit of media, a little bit of creative, a little bit of data, all of these things kind of thrown together in a whether it was growth or user acquisition. I just knew that's what I wanted to be, and I thought to myself, man, like if I put 100% of myself into this, if I just go all in, I'm gonna get this role. I'm gonna be this person, and I did. I put everything into it. I was working 6 days a week, sometimes 7. I would go in on the weekends. I, would post up. This is a beautiful office in Santa Monica by the beach. And they put so much trust in me. They gave me so much room to do my thing that I would have done it for free. I would have paid to be there. That's how much I loved being on this squad. And after about 4 or 5 months, Matt, the CEO, is going every week, going to new investor meetings, and then finally, boom, he raises our seed round, the first like $200,000 to $400,000 seed round. And this is something that like every day during stand-up, we're always trying to see, like, are we going to get the funding? Are we going to get the funding? And then he does it. And Matt says, guys, we are going to celebrate together. We're going to go to Las Vegas. We're going to ball out. We're going to have an amazing time. And at that moment, that solidified it for me. Like, I will go down with this ship. Like, this is the most fun I've ever had. We went to Vegas. We had such a blast. We went to this amazing dinner, and we got drinks, and we danced, and we did all, like, just everything you'd want to do in Vegas. And we get home, and the very first week, we got home, let's say on a Sunday. So that Monday, I get back into the office. Monday to Friday, I'm on my A game. I like the ideas coming out, the data, everything is amazing. And we had the biggest week of growth we'd ever had at the company. Was the week we got back from Las Vegas. So I'm feeling good. I'm feeling like re-energized from Vegas. I come back in on Monday, the second week after we get back, and Matt calls me into his office. And I go to sit down at the office. Matt is sitting right across from me. I see Todd, who is the COO, is sitting right to my right. And Matt looks at me and he says, Sean, you are such an amazing team member. We love having you here. You work so hard. You have so much passion and energy. But unfortunately, we've been talking to the board, and we need to bring on a director of growth or director of user acquisition that has more experience than you do. I'm very, very sorry, but today is unfortunately your last day working here at InstaCanvas.